Hello everyone, welcome to NCERT 6 to 10 class in short. Today we will be discussing the social science chapter of NCERT textbook, first chapter, that is what, where, how and when. This chapter helps us to learn about how to find about history of something. How can we find out what had happened in the past? Is it possible? We can find about what had happened yesterday by reading newspaper, watching TV, listening to radio and all. About 1 year ago, by asking others, by searching newspaper or anything, we can identify. But what about long ago? How can we find out what had happened long years back? This is what we are discussing in this chapter. What can we know about the past? What should we know? Let's see. What people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, where they live, games, stories and everything of children, life of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, artists, musicians and scientists. We will be able to know all those things by learning about the past. We will begin our chapter by learning about the map of South Asia. This is a map of South Asia, including the present countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan and Sri Lanka, and the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Iran, China and Myanmar. South Asia is often called a subcontinent because although it is smaller than a continent, it is very large and is separated from the rest of Asia by seas, hills and mountains. So we will be learning about this map in detail. Find the river Narmada on the map. People have lived along the banks of this river for several 100,000 years. They were skilled gatherers. They knew the plants in the forest and collected fruit, roots and leaves. They have hunted animals too. Now find the Suleiman and Kirta hills to the northwest in this map. Some of the places where men and women started cultivating crops like wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here in the Suleiman and Kirta hills. They also started rearing animals like sheep and goat here. So this was the beginning. Now find the Garo hills to the northeast and the Vindhyas in central India. These were some of the areas where agriculture first developed. Rice was first grown to the north of Vindhyas. Now locate the river Indus and its tributaries. So a tributary is a river or stream that does not join to ocean directly. It will be joining to a bigger river or stream. Indus has many tributaries. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Now let's locate the river Ganga and its tributary known as the Sun. In ancient times, the area along these rivers to the south of Ganga was known as Magadha. Now it is in Bihar state. It has many powerful rulers and they have set up a kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. When we are going through the history of South Asia, throughout, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. The hills, high mountains, deserts, rivers and seas made journeys difficult and dangerous at times, but never impossible. They have traveled from one place to another for different purposes. Their needs were various. They traveled in search of livelihood, to escape from natural disasters, for conquering others' lands, and trade relations among merchants. Religious teachers taught religious principles. Still, some traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover some more exciting places. These were the needs. Through this travel, their needs were satisfied. Not only that, ideas were shared among people. Hills, mountains and seas form the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. When it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wandered could and did scale the mountains and cross the seas. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. That is, by the movement of these people, our culture has got many innovations. People have shared new ways of carving stones, composing music, and even cooking food. Now let's think of how did the land get its name? That is how India got its name. The word India comes from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit, that is from the river Indus. The Iranians and Greeks who came about 2500 years ago were familiar with the Indus, called it the Hindos or Indos, and the land of the east of the river was called India. Another name Bharat. The name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. Now let's know about Rig Veda. Rig Veda is an ancient collection of Vedic Sanskrit hymn. Actually, there are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda, and Rig Veda is considered as the oldest known Vedic Sanskrit text, dated to about 3500 years ago. That is, this text is written about 3500 years ago. So the name came from the people who were mentioned in Rig Veda and it was used for the country. Now let's think of how can we find about the past? What methods can be used? We can learn about the life of past people by many different ways. One method is by searching for and reading the books that were written long years ago. Second one is studying inscriptions. The books that are written long years ago are known as manuscripts. Manuscripts are books, documents, or a piece of music written by hand rather than typed or printed. That means handwritten books were known as manuscripts. So almost all the books in the olden days were manuscripts. That means they were written hand. The word manuscript comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. Did they have actual book like those of today's? Actually, no. Manuscripts were usually written on palm leaves or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as birch. These were growing in the Himalayas. So the informations were written on either on palm leaves or on the birch of the trees. This was the way. Here are some photographs of the manuscripts that were used in the olden days. Let's see. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived. Those survived ones may be preserved in temples and monasteries. Here in this photograph, you can see a destroyed manuscript. It may be destroyed by insects or somehow. As it was written on palm leaf, it was very difficult to preserve them properly. Palm leaves may be cut into many pieces and it will be tied together to make a book. It was the way. Now let's think of what will be there in the manuscripts, what was written in the manuscripts. Actually, it dealt with all kinds of subjects like religious beliefs and practices, the lives of king, medicine, science, and there were epics, poems, and even plays. And the language used for writing was mainly Sanskrit, and some people may written it in Prakrit language, that means the language of the ordinary people. Still some written it in Tamil language. These were the languages used for writing manuscripts. Now let's see the second evidence, that is inscriptions. Inscriptions are writings on relatively hard surfaces like stone or metal. Rather than writing in palm leaf, the informations will be written on stones or metal surfaces. It may be difficult to write, but the thing is, it cannot be destroyed so easily by the insects or any other ways. Now let's see some of the inscriptions. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them properly. So kings used inscription for informing others about their orders. Still, there were some other kinds of inscriptions where men and women, including kings and queens, record what they did. For example, kings often kept records of the victories in their battle. Now here you can see an inscription given in your textbook. An old inscription dates to about 2250 years ago and was found in Kandahar, which is in present-day Afghanistan. It was inscribed on the orders of a ruler named Ashoka, whom you will be learning in chapter 8. When we write anything, we use a script. Scripts consist of letters or signs. When we read what is written or speak, we use a language. This inscription was inscribed in two different scripts and languages, Greek at the top and Aramaic in below, which were used in this area. That means the language used in Kandahar. Now think about the advantages of inscribing something in inscriptions. How it would be advantageous for the olden people. Actually, if they have written in palm scripts, they have written, but it is more advantageous, right? Inscriptions are more advantageous than palm leaf because they cannot be destroyed by insects or some other way. Okay, and it had some difficulties too, right? That means writing on metal surfaces, it would be tedious and it would take too much time. And tools should be used very hard. They have to use very sharp tools for writing. These were all the difficulties they might have faced during inscribing. Anyway, this was a strong evidence for us, that means people of today's, for understanding the life of the past. Besides the manuscripts and inscriptions, many other things were also used in the past. Those who study about these subjects are known as archaeologists. An archaeologist is a person who studies human history by excavating and examining physical remains like stone, metal, brick, paintings or sculptures. They also explore and excavate to find tools, weapons, pans, pots, ornaments and coins which may be made of stone, bone, baked clay or metal, which means they make use of all these materials for their study. That means they have to learn about the life of the past people. So every single evidence they are using and they make as a weapon for their study. They also look for bones of fishes, birds and animals to find out what people ate in the past. Plants remain to survive far more rarely. That is, if the seeds of grains or pieces of wood are burnt, they will remain in a charred form. We cannot get enough evidence from plant parts. Historians use the word source to refer to the information found in manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. Once sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as it is reconstructed bit by bit. So, historians are like detectives who use all these clues to find out about our past. So, it can be said that studying about the past is a tedious task. One past or many. Normally, we use the term past as past, but in our textbook it is given as pasts because the word past was different for different groups of people. So the word past is used as past in our textbook. Let's see how the word past become past for different groups of people. The life of herders and farmers were different from that of king and queen. The life of merchants were different from that of a craft person. Even at present, the customs and practices in different parts of the country are different. This difference was seen even in the earlier times. The lifestyle, food, clothes and everything we are using are different in different states. This difference was there in the beginning. That means in the olden India itself there were differences among the people, among the group of people who were living. For instance, if a person is living in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they know how to fish, they know how to live in that way. But a person who is living in a city wanted to serve their food by others. So in the same way, there were differences in the lifestyle of people in different regions in the past too. Besides this, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about the kings and the battles they fought because they kept the records of their victories. Ordinary people, on the other hand, did not keep records of what they did, and hence much information about their lives remain unknown. Now let's think about what do dates mean. Here you can see the calendar 2022. The year 2022 means 2022 years after the birth of Jesus Christ. The years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ. All the dates before the birth of Jesus Christ are generally counted backwards and usually have the letters BC, that means before Christ. That is, we say that the wheel was invented in 4000 BC, that means 4000 years back the wheel was invented. Similarly, you can see some letters may be there with the dates, that means BC. BC means before Christ. AD, you can see AD means in Latin it is mean Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord, that is Christ. So the year 2022 can be written as 2022 AD. Sometimes CE is used of AD and BC is used of BC. That means CE means Common Era and BCE means before Common Era. Now, inscriptions are inscribed over 100,000 years ago. All inscriptions contain scripts and languages. These languages and scripts may change over time. This is a fact. That means we are using a different language which is very different from the language we have used from the olden people. Then, how do scholars understand what was inscribed, or how do the common people or people like us can understand what do they have inscribed? That means the olden people, how can we understand the meaning of it? How can we understand the ideas? What was the idea they have shared through their inscriptions without knowing the language or scripts? How can we study about that language or the language used by the olden people? There is a way. This can be done through a process known as decipherment. Decipherment can be better understood by a story from Egypt. Egypt is a country in North Africa, and it had kings and queens about 5000 years ago. Rosetta is a town on the north coast of Egypt, and here an inscribed stone was found which contained inscriptions in 3 different languages and scripts. One is in Greek and the other 2 forms of Egyptian were found. Scholars who could read Greek figured out that the names of kings and queens were enclosed in little frame called a cartouche. They then placed the Greek and the Egyptian signs side by side and identified the sounds for which the Egyptian letters stood. As you can see, a lion stood for L and a bird for A. Once they knew what the letters stood for, they could read the other inscriptions as well. In this way, they have deciphered the meanings what the olden people have shared to us. So this is what we call as decipherment. So this is the end of our chapter, and we will be discussing the question and answers of this chapter in the next video. Until then, bye and thank you.